They marched up my driveway with clipboards in their hands and confidently informed me that I had exactly 10 minutes to leave my own property, or they would have the sheriff remove me. What they had no idea about was that my phone had already been recording the entire encounter for the previous 6 minutes. In this state, what they were doing wasn't just intimidation, it was evidence. By the time they finished talking, they'd practically handed me a recorded confession. Before we get any further into this story, let me know where you're watching from. Drop your country down in the comments because I always enjoy seeing how far these stories travel. And if you haven't subscribed to HOA Revenge Stories yet, now's the perfect time. Hit that subscribe button because this story only gets more unbelievable from here. I'm Daniel, and about 3 years ago, I purchased 5 acres of land on the edge of a neighborhood called Brookline Ridge. Before I signed a single document, I verified with the county that my property sat completely outside the HOA's official boundaries. That mattered to me because I planned to build a workshop behind the house. It wasn't anything extravagant, just a quiet place where I could restore old trucks and enjoy some peace away from everyone else. The HOA board, however, seemed convinced they controlled far more land than they actually did. Over the next 2 years, they mailed me violation notices about unauthorized buildings, old vehicles parked outside, even the color of my mailbox. Every letter went straight into a folder, because none of those complaints had anything to do with them. It was my land, my permits, and my property rights. Receiving letters was annoying enough. What happened on a Tuesday morning in March crossed an entirely different line, and before it was over, the HOA would end up writing me a check instead of sending me another violation notice. I was lying underneath my '78 Bronco when I heard tires crunching across the gravel driveway. 3 people walked toward me with the confidence of homeowners inspecting their own property. The HOA president, one of the board members, and another man I'd never seen before, carrying a tape measure. "Mr. Daniel," the president announced, lifting her clipboard like it gave her authority. "You're violating Section 12 of the community rules. You need to stop what you're doing and vacate this area immediately." I slid out from beneath the truck, wiped the grease from my hands, and looked directly at her. "Vacate? This is my property. This land falls under our jurisdiction," she replied without hesitation, sounding like she'd memorized every word before getting out of the car. The interesting part was that I'd heard that exact statement before. 2 months earlier, I'd spent an entire weekend digging through county plat maps and comparing them with the HOA's officially recorded boundary filings. I already knew something they didn't, but I wasn't about to reveal it yet. Instead, I smiled, reached into my jacket pocket, pulled out my phone, and held it up. "Would you mind saying that one more time for the camera?" Her expression changed immediately. That's when I noticed the man with the tape measure had already stepped beyond the property marker and onto my grass. His boots were planted firmly on land that didn't belong to him. At the time, it looked like a tiny detail. Later, it would become one of the most important moments of the entire case. "You have 10 minutes, the president repeated. "If you refuse to leave, we'll call the sheriff." I kept recording. "So you're planning to ask the sheriff to remove me from property that I legally own?" "This community has authority over this land." "Does it?" I asked calmly. "Because I have documents that say otherwise. I'm just not ready to show them to you yet." That sentence wasn't an accident. Sitting on the workbench inside my shop was a thick folder filled with paperwork I'd been quietly putting together for nearly 2 months. I hadn't prepared it for this exact morning, because I never knew this confrontation would happen today. I prepared it because I knew eventually something like this would, and when I finally opened that folder, everything would change. Meanwhile, the board member carrying the tape measure continued walking along my tree line, pushing small survey flags into my dirt as though he were marking his own property. Every step he took, every flag he planted, every inch of ground he crossed, all of it belonged to one person. Me. The HOA president continued talking without taking a breath, threatening fines, legal action, and escalating penalties. I let every word come out. The recording was becoming stronger by the second. Then she said something that made my stomach tighten while giving me exactly what I needed. "We've done this before." Then she smiled. "Nobody has ever challenged us." I kept the camera pointed at her, and most homeowners never bother looking that deeply into the records. HOAs know that, and they depend on it. Hidden inside a 1994 amendment that had originally been filed to correct a mapping mistake was a newly drawn boundary line. That revised map completely removed a strip of land along the ridge, including my 5 acres, from the association's jurisdiction. The unbelievable part was that the HOA had filed the amendment themselves decades earlier, then apparently forgotten it even existed. I called a real estate attorney because I honestly expected her to tell me I had misunderstood the documents. Instead, she went completely silent for a moment before saying, "If that filing is valid, and it certainly appears to be, they have absolutely no authority over your property. None. And if they've been issuing violation notices anyway," she continued, "you're looking at a documented pattern of misconduct." She explained something I hadn't known before. Repeatedly entering private property after you've either been directly told or should reasonably know that you have no legal authority isn't simply disrespectful. Depending on state law, it can qualify as civil trespass and, in some situations, support claims for financial damages every single time it happens. Every single time. My mind immediately replayed every so-called inspection they'd conducted during the previous 2 years. Every walk across my property, every survey flag pushed into my ground, every unauthorized visit, every step taken without permission. I didn't mention any of that while they stood in my driveway that Tuesday morning. Instead, I kept my phone recording and allowed them to keep talking. "Your 10 minutes are up," the HOA president announced. "We're calling the sheriff." "Please do," I replied calmly. I'd actually like a deputy to come out here. That answer caught her completely off guard. Most people don't invite law enforcement to what they're being told is their own eviction. About 20 minutes later, a sheriff's deputy pulled into the driveway. The HOA president rushed over and immediately launched into her version of events, throwing around phrases like trespassing, unauthorized construction, and HOA violations. The deputy listened patiently, without interrupting. Then he turned toward me. I walked into my workshop, picked up the folder I'd been preparing for months, and handed him 2 documents. The first was the official county plat map, showing the legal boundaries of my parcel. The second was the HOA's own recorded 1994 amendment, with the section highlighting exactly where their jurisdiction ended, nearly a quarter-mile away from where everyone was standing. The deputy studied both documents carefully. Then he read the amendment again. Finally, he looked directly at the HOA president. "Ma'am," he said, "based on these recorded filings, you're the one standing on private property without authorization." He paused before adding, "And from what I'm hearing, this doesn't sound like the first time." The color drained from her face. That was when I finally said what I'd been holding back for the past 20 minutes. "You mentioned that nobody has ever challenged you." "I did. I just started doing it 2 months ago, quietly. And I've gathered documentation proving that every visit your board has made since then was an act of trespassing." Then I pointed out everything they had just done. The survey flags, the board members' boots crossing my property line, the tape measure stretched across land they never had the legal right to inspect. Every inspection, every violation notice, every threat of fines, every unauthorized visit. Everything had now been documented, time-stamped, and backed by evidence that couldn't be disputed. Later, my attorney calculated the damages using the HOA's own inspection records, certified violation letters, and the video recordings I'd been collecting over the previous 4 months. We weren't trying to win some enormous jackpot. There was no reason to. We simply filed for exactly what state law allowed, damages for each documented act of trespass, attorney's fees, and a written public retraction of every violation notice they'd ever issued against my property. The HOA's insurance company agreed to settle the case within 6 weeks. Today, I still live on those same 5 acres. My workshop is still standing exactly where it has always been. The old Bronco is still parked inside, waiting for its next project. The only thing that's changed is what's hanging beside my driveway. I framed a laminated copy of that 1994 amendment and mounted it where anyone walking onto the property can see it before taking another step. Since the day of that settlement, not a single representative from the HOA has stepped onto my land. No survey flags, no clipboards, no violation letters, no surprise inspections, nothing. The settlement wasn't valuable, simply because it's C.